Hello, thanks for joining me. Today I'm taking apart this Amal monobloc carburettor, which is actually off my Triumph Tiger Cub. And so I thought it'd be interesting to make a video about this if you ever find yourself in the situation of working on an old Amal carburettor like this and you're not sure how they go together and what they look like inside. I think they're lovely old carburettors. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to inspect it all for wear, and I'll talk about the areas that you need to be particularly vigilant with these carburettors where they tend to wear or get damaged. And then I'm going to throw it into the ultrasonic cleaner as well. Now, the reason I'm doing this is off my Tiger Cub, which I bought the back end of last year, and the bike's just been sat over the winter. Now, I did actually drain the fuel out of the carburettor at the start of the winter, but even then, I think it would be useful to take it all apart and give it a good clean in the ultrasonic cleaner, just to make sure I haven't got any blocked jets or any gunge and things on stuff. So, for example, when I picked it up, I noticed that the tickler was a bit stiff. It's okay now because I've been playing around with it, but it had gunged up a little bit. So just things like that, check it over. But also a second thing is that I've not had this particular carburettor apart since I bought the bike. I bought the bike the back end of last year, and so I'm very interested to see what spec jets I've got in it and needle. I know what the standard specs are for this carburettor, but I don't know what are actually in here. So it'd just be interesting to have a look, take it apart and make a note of that. Now, Amal made a number of different monobloc carburettors like this, and this particular one is the 375/2532. Now, how do I know that? Well, usually there should be a number, and you see there's something stamped on here, and it would say, 375, 376, 389, whatever, and then some other reference number after that. In the case of this one, it says 3/5/32, which is not very helpful, and I've speculated what that might mean. It might be to do with the important sizes, the relative sizes, initial sizes on it. But the reason I know that this is a 375 is that I have measured the bore, and so the bore is the diameter here, of the main hole. This is the flange where it fastens onto the engine, and that is 25/32 of an inch, which is roughly 20 millimeters. And Amal only made the 375 in this size. The other models, the 376 and the 389, were larger because they were for bigger bikes, much larger bore. You look at one of these off at one of the Bonnevilles, for example, much larger bore. So the construction and design of them is the same. It's just the size of the bore, and then obviously the size of the jets and the needle inside that make a difference. If you are used to handling modern Japanese carburettors, the first thing you're going to notice when you pick up one of these old Amals is the weight. This is a weighty beast, and in fact I got my weighing scale here just to put it on. So if I just switch that on and zero it, the weighing scale, just move that so you can see it clearly. That is just over a kilogram, just over 1,000 grams. So you can see it's a hefty bit of metal. Is that, right? Okay. So I'm going to start talking it apart, and as I say, as I take it apart, I'll talk about some of the things that we need to check. Now, obviously, the hole in the top here is where the throttle cable would go in, and so I did actually take the top off here to disconnect the throttle cable when I took this off the bike, which is actually quite some time ago now. And then I just put this lid back on just to make sure I didn't lose any of the parts, essentially. So to undo this, there's the lid here, and then underneath that we've got the spring and the slide. I find it's useful I'm going to use this finger just to keep pressure on the lid, and we've got this flanged. It's actually knurled, so you can turn it easily, and you can see that just undoes. That's brass actually. Again, one of the first things to check for then is that this thread has not been damaged. So as somebody who's a bit ham-fisted, tries putting this back on cross-threaded, will cross-thread and damage that thread, unfortunately. But if you just keep the pressure on there, once you take that off, you can see that's off now, and then I can just gently ease the pressure off this spring. And one thing to note as I take it apart, on the lid here there's a little tab, and then there's a little corresponding lip on the body of the carburettor there, so when you put it in, it orients that way around. The lid must sit that way. Now you'll notice on the lid there's the hole where the throttle cable was in there, and then there's another hole which on some carburettors then you would have a choke cable going in there, but you can see this one's just been blanked off with a bolt through there. Also there should be a clip on here as well, which is missing, but it's not an essential functioning part. I don't know where that's got to, probably somewhere in the history of this bike and this carburettor, it disappeared or broke or whatever. So that's off. And then we've got the slide and the spring here. I do notice, and I remember seeing this when I disconnected the throttle, this spring looks like it's been cut down. It's maybe been cut down for something longer, because it's not flat at that end. You can just see there where it's just been snipped off, and then the other end just pushes into the slide, which I'm just pulling the slide out with that now. So we've got the slide and the needle assembly. So when I put this back together, it's not going to be difficult to remember this, but I just remember that the flat end of the spring just clips onto there. If I try and do it the other way around, it's not going to clip on properly. So we've got this slide, and notice the cutaway section. If I hold it flat, you can see there's a cutaway section on the slide there, and then we've got the needle, and the needle is retained with a little clip, which that's on upside down. That should be the other way around. So there's a probably doesn't matter in terms of the functioning, but there's this, hold it so you can see it, there's that little clip there, and that's for adjusting that. There's a little slot in the top of the slide here that it goes in, and that's for adjusting the height of the needle. And trying to get that in focus there we are. You can see the little clip in there, and if I just take that out, and you can slide the needle out. You can slide the needle out. Once you've taken that clip off, you can slide the needle down, or you can push it up. It can go either way. And you can see on the needle there, there's the different notches, the different positions, and the normal one is the third position, i.e. the middle position. So one of the first things to check is have a look, where on the slide. I mean, obviously you're going to get wear marks because it's going up and down, but it's worth having a look and see how that seats within the body of the carburettor. Help if I put it in the right way around, because it should move up and down. They should get the full range of movement of the slide up there without it sticking at all, but without it being too loose. So hopefully you can see as I'm fiddling with this. Well, I'll show you. It is, because I can just tip it like that and it comes out, but it's not too loose, because if I put it in and sort of wiggle it around, there's a little bit of movement. Obviously it's not tolerance fit, but that doesn't look too bad. A little bit of scuffing on it there. One problem that you do get sometimes with these is this whole, because it's a sort of zinc alloy, it's actually quite soft, is this metal, and you can see the walls here are very thin, and so if somebody's a bit ham-fisted and clamps it in a vise or something like that, it can get to be slightly ovalled, can that hole, which means then the slide doesn't fit in it properly. Another thing that you have to watch out for is these flanges where it attaches. This is where it attaches into the manifold, the engine, and you can see it bolts on either side, and there's a little rubber O-ring seal goes in there, and then there's a gasket, and sometimes there's a or what's it called, you know, to stop the heat, you know, a little sort of space to stop the heat going through. Mine's gone blank on what it's called. And yeah, if this is over tightened, these two outer edges of this flange can pull out, which means that in the middle bits here, it's not seating properly. You can get a little bit of a leak. So I've just got a straight edge here. I'm just putting that straight edge across, just looking round. And actually that looks good to me. That looks all good and level. Another thing that you can do with it is you can put it on a level surface. I've got one in the engineering shop. I haven't got one here. You know, in my machine shop, I've got a proper level surface. But you can put it on a level surface, and then you can just see if it rocks around. You know, I can't guarantee the levelness of this workbench, but even then, I can see that there's no real movement on that. So yeah, that's good. You know, because if that you know, those you know, flanges get, you know, pulled out there, you know, well, you can try and fix it. You know, you can sort of grind it down if you've got a flat surface and wet and dry. Some people do that, but in this case we're good, which is excellent news. I'm going to take the float chamber cover off here, and I've obviously, you know, it's the Amal trademark on there. This is just held on with 3 screws, so this is another area where you potentially get problems, because these are the 3 points where there's the tension, and so it can distort this cover. And I guess one of the weaknesses in this kind of design is, you know, the petrol level is coming up the side of here, you know, unlike the sort of later concentric carburettors where the float ball fits underneath. And therefore, if there's any kind of problem with the gasket, you can see there's a gasket underneath the cover here. So any kind of problems with distortion in the cover, the gasket, or unevenness of the mating surface, then you're going to get a leaking carburettor. Now this one I know doesn't leak, because, as I say, it's come off the bike and it was running fine. But even then, just going to check all the surfaces and the gasket and everything. So just loosening off these 3 screws. They're just, you know, it being an old British bike, there's just straightforward slot screws. Nothing fancy like Allen heads. And this is another area where these sometimes get stripped or pulled out. If people try and over tighten them, can distort it, or they can actually damage them. So you know, one thing which I will do before I reassemble it, always do, is just clean the thread on here very carefully. Make sure that the thread in the body is nice and clean. And even, you know, I might actually put a little bit of copper ease on that, just to make sure that we're not going to have any problems with seizing or corrosion on that. So right, I'll take this cover off, and you can see there's a gasket on the inside of here. Again, looking round, if you do have problems with distortion with this, it is quite difficult to fix, because you know, if I hold this round, you can see there's this internal lip here. This bit's higher, so you can't just sort of put it on a flat surface and round it down. Anyway, I think that is all true. There's no sort of visible distortion in that. There's the gasket on there, but, you know, looking at that with my straight edge, it all looks fine. And then you can see inside the chamber there, I actually have a brass float. So on the more modern ones, they replace with plastic floats, but this is a brass float. Before you take this off, you just need to note, and again, I'll use the needle as a point here, there's a little spacer bush. I'll just lift it up so it's closer to the camera. Just on here, this is the pin that the float pivots on, pivot pin, and there's a little spacer bush there, which I'll just see if I can get my fingers in there. Yeah, that's it. Pull off. That's it. Don't lose that. That little, well, it's a brass bush. It's a bit dull. Is that brass bush? And so the slide will just, sorry, the float will just slide out. It comes up towards the camera, and you can see the valve. And this is one of the old style plastic ones. I can see it's a white plastic again. I'll show you clearly when I take it out, but there's the valve there. and it's from the older style plastic ones. And the more modern ones, they replaced it with a sort of brass one or a metal one with a plastic tip. So one thing to note before you take the float out is which way round it is, orientation, because it is possible on these carburettors, well, on a lot of carburettors actually, it is possible to put it back in the wrong orientation. But there's two things which are a good clue of which way it goes. Firstly, you can see on this one quite clearly there is a tide mark there, isn't there, from the level of the fuel in the float bowl, and so I'll actually put it back in wrong way around so you can see what I mean. But the other thing is, I'll just move it in more closely. You can probably see that it's part of the hinge here, but there's actually a little flat plate on that side that pushes up against the valve there, and if you put it in the wrong way around, you won't have that. Okay, so let's check that out. It should just slide out. If I just shake it, there we are, it comes out. And so I don't lose it. There we go. So you can see that's just a white plastic item. And obviously the pointed end goes in the pointed end first, because that's the bit that closes off. So this is what I mean about the float. This is an old brass float. There is, and you can actually see the polish spot there where it's been making contact. But that's the bit that needs to go towards the top. So as it lifts up, that's the bit that pushes close. You can put it in the other way around, that way it will fit. Look, I'll show you. So just put it in there. So that's in upside down, and if you accidentally put it upside down, it's going to cause you all sorts of misery. But can you see that the tide mark here is the tide mark should be across that way, so that's clear. But also here there's not the plate that pushes up against the valve there. So anyway, there we go. So what we're looking at here, well, first of all, the needle, the float needle there, it's this little plastic item, looking for where, and particularly, it's the surface that closes. So this is the mating surface. We're looking for wear, damage on that surface, where it won't seal properly. So when the float goes up, it pushes it in, and it's not actually sealing and stopping the petrol from going through. Doesn't look too bad. I'll look at that closer under a magnifying glass later. Obviously looking for any kind of damage on the float. You'll notice this float is not adjustable. On the more modern carburettors and the concentric type carburettors, there's a little tab here, and normally you can see on the back of the there's a little groove there where it would actually fit into a slot. So as it would be that way up, and as it goes up, as the float goes up, it sort of closes off the petrol flow, and usually that tab is bendable so you can adjust it, whereas on these old monoblocks it's not adjustable. There's no adjustment in that. I guess if you were going to adjust it, you would have to put something on the top of there just to to make that higher. That plate you could possibly braze, or just put a little blob of braze or something like that on top of it to lift it up, but I've not needed to do that. Okay, the other thing to check once we got this off is that this mating surface here, for the cover is true. A little bit of corrosion on there. I may just gently, get that on my flat surface like that. Obviously, I have to undo this because this is in the way at the moment. But and just give it a little bit of a rub on the flat surface before I put it together, just to make sure that mating surface is all clean. Because obviously this gasket will then, excuse me, this gasket will seal against there. So getting a good seal is dependent on having a nice clean surface there. Okay, so this is where the fuel line goes up to the petrol tank. There should be a fuel filter in here, so let's have a look in here. So undo this and see what we have. Yeah, so there's the fuel filter. So, and give that a bit of a clean. Looks like it's seen better days, does that? I don't know if you can see, it's a bit get that focus, come on. Bit distorted is that, but it's nice and clean. No, it works okay. So what you've got is you probably can't see, but the metal bolt that goes through has got holes in it, so the fuel goes through this mesh filter through and then down into the carburettor. So right, I'm just gonna undo this and take this off as well. The main reason I'm taking this off is that I'm going to put the carburettor body into the ultrasonic cleaner, and I don't want to put the plastic bits, and I don't want to damage any of the plastic bits, and I strongly suspect that that is distorted because that very thing has happened. Somebody has put the whole unit in an ultrasonic cleaner and it's kind of melted and distorted the plastic slightly there. So that's off. So that's the inlet there. We've then got the tickler switch here, which you can see now where that works. So when you press that, this plunger pushes the float valve down, which then causes more petrol to come in, which floods the carburettor, gives you that extra fuel for the cold start. And so I said that was sticking very slightly when I picked the carburettor up, because when I brought it into the workshop, I was fiddling with it as you do, and I thought, oh, that's sticky. So I'm going to take that off as well, and then I'll just make sure that's clean. It's still a little bit stiff. Make sure that that's clean and works fine. None of the components on the carburettor should be too tight, because everything's made out of this zinc alloy and brass, and they're both quite soft metals, so you don't want to be tightening anything down too much. See, there's the spring in there. Can I bring it up closer to the camera? Oh, there we go. So we've got the plunger and we've got the spring in there as well, which obviously then returns the plunger after you've pressed it down. So I'm just going to take that plunger out and the spring out, clean it up. It'll all go in the ultrasonic cleaner. Right, so looking around the other side. Right, we've got the adjustment screws. Now, a basic rule of thumb, and I've talked about this in previous videos I've made, basic rule of thumb is if you've already got the carburettor set up and it's running, you need to preserve those settings so you know what they are. So this is the pilot air screw here. So that's the pilot, that's the kind of tick over mixture one. Incidentally, with the pilot screw, this one is on the engine side of the carburettor, so technically we call that one a fuel screw. On some carburettors it's on the intake side, the air filter side or the intake side, in which case it will be an air screw. So if it's on this side, you're adjusting the airflow. If it's on this side, you're adjusting the fuel. But I just call it a pilot screw. So you can see that's the carburettor upright. It's at 12 o'clock is the slot on that screw. So I'm going to screw it all the way in and then make a note. So you do it half a turn at a time. So half a turn, 1 turn, 1.5 turns, 2 turns, and well, that's 2 turns exactly, just within a gnat's nudge. So that was 2 turns out. So making a note of that, it's worth writing it down, but as I'm talking it onto the video, I can always refer back to the video if I forget. And take that out. And it's very important to take these out when you're cleaning the carburettor so that you can get the cleaning fluid in the ultrasonic cleaner down all these passageways. So you can see there is a point to that, like a needle point to this particular adjustment screw, because that's going out and opening and closing the hole that allows the fuel through. Also notice that there is a little spring on here. Bring it closer to the camera again. There's a little spring on there, and really the work that spring is doing is just stopping that screw vibrating and undoing itself when you're riding along. So it's just to retain the spring in whatever setting you've put it in. And there's a similar the spring on the idler screw. So this screw goes up into the body, and then this stops the slide. So it stops against the slide, and in actual fact you can see there, can you see that little edge? That's where it hits against the side of the slide, and so that just adjusts how far the slide will go down. So you adjust your tick over with this screw. So again, we need to just check and see you know, how far that is adjusted. Obviously you can fine tune it all when you put it back together, but it's useful. So that's at about sort of 10 past the hour is that screw, looking straight down on it. So we got half a turn, 1 turn, 1.5 turns, 2 turns, exactly 2.5 turns. That was 2.5 turns out. So remembering that, I can take that all the way out. You can actually, this is designed, it's nil, so it's designed so you can turn it by hand, so that, you know, if you're out on the bike and you just need to adjust your tick over, if it's too high or too low, you can just reach down to the carburettor and adjust it with your fingers without having to get any tools out. But it is easier, I have to say, with a screwdriver. Right. There we are. And so you'll notice this one, when we focus, we've got the spring again, and at the same function, that spring's there just to stop it from vibrating and adjusting itself. But you can see this one has a flat end because that is just pressing against the we get in focus. So I've got the camera on autofocus here, so excuse me. So yeah, it just presses against that lip on the edge of there, and then as you screw it in, it pushes up slightly on the slide, or vice versa, the other way around. Okay, this third screw that you can see here, which lies between the other two, that was the pilot screw and that was the idler screw there, that's non-adjustable. That's just screwed in, so that's just blanking off where, you know, where there's a passage where it's been drilled in the body. So I'll just undo that, and then again that'll just allow when I put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, it'll just allow the fluid to go through there. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at the jets. We've got the two jets here. So the smaller one is the pilot jet, and the larger one is the main jet. So take the pilot jet out first. I'm interested to see what size these are. So that's just a cap over the end of the jet. The actual jet itself is brass, and you can see there's a slot. I'm going to hold it up to the camera. You can see there's a slot in the end of that. You can screw that out, and it should not be tight at all. The same reason I've just explained. Right, there is the pilot jet, and there should be a size written on that somewhere. There is, it's written on there. My eyesight is getting poor. I think that says 25. Yeah, fairly certain you're not going to be able to read that on the screen. But if I just hold it up and just point out, that's where it's written there, and it says 25 on that. I need to check that against what the spec is for this particular carburettor. Just have a look. Yeah, pilot jet is 25, so that's the standard pilot jet for this model, which is the 375/2532. Okay, just, you know, there's not good or bad. I was just curious as to what it was going to be. Okay, let's have a look at the main jet, and again, as it all wants to come out in one go, I'll bring it out in one go and then I'll take it apart whilst it's out. Okay, so what we've got there is the whole jet assembly, and of course that's where the needle goes down here. But to get to the main jet, I need to take this apart. So Give myself a little bit of space. Oh, and by the way, yeah, there's this little washer there which you need to just I'll put there with the nut so you don't lose it. Okay. If I can just get that in focus, you can see there's a fibre washer on there which I'll just slide off. It's important. Put that back on. Doesn't look too bad. I've got a box of spare fibre washers, so I might replace that. So what I was trying to do there with it mounted on the body was take, again I get my needle as a pointer, this bit, separate this bit from this bit, but it was a bit tight. So what I'm going to do, and I'll just do it off camera, is I'm just going to mount this bit in my soft jaws in my vise, and then I got better purchase on this and undo it. Okay, got it, but that was actually quite tight. I'm glad I decided to put it in the jaws there. So I just slackened that off. So if I undo this now, the main jet is inside here. So that's the main jet there. Again, I'll take that out and undo that and take that out. That's not too bad, but you can see it's all dirty. It's all going to benefit from a clean. So that is it. That is the carburettor stripped right down into all its constituent pieces. As far as I can see, there's no problems with this carburettor at all. Everything seems to be fine. The bike was running fine before I took it apart. It just needs a good clean. So I'm going to throw all of these parts now into the ultrasonic cleaner and then put it back together again. I hope you found that interesting and useful to watch. I'm not going to video, because I've gone on quite a bit at this point, I'm not going to video the process of putting it in the ultrasonic cleaner. I already done another video a while back of putting a carburettor in ultrasonic cleaner, so I'll put a link to that one at the end of this video. So thanks a lot for watching. Hope you found it interesting. Hope you found it fun. These are lovely carburettors, aren't they? And yeah, ride safe. See you again soon. Bye.